on the horizon. It's been said that those that have the eyes to see and the ears to hear will play a paramount role in the furthering of humanity and civilized society. But can civilized society and humanity survive the coming conflicts not seen since a dawn of time in ages by past? But you can find true forms of information and knowledge in abundance at revolution.radio, freedomsluts.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the globe. Stand upon the right side of history. Revolution.
Hey, and good morning. Welcome to Morning Coffee Rants with Dan. I am Dan, the Spiritual Anarchist, your host. Today is January 29th in the year of all of us, 2026. I have a pretty good show set up for today, but I don't have any order I'm going in as usual. I like it like that. It's more authentic. I have some general things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to jump around a little bit. Let's see. Well, I'm not going to really talk about things going on in the world, in the news. All I'm going to say is you need to repeat after me and say to yourself, I'm safe. I don't fear government thugs. I don't fear the fear propaganda. I am grateful for what I have. My cup is half full, not half empty. And I honestly have gratitude every day as I look around at what I have, as opposed to what I don't. We all have challenges we face in life. Some people are running around blindly, and I envy them to a degree, but they're really living their lives. So when you become more awakened to what's going on in the world, are you living your life? And there's been some times where I could say, no, I don't think I was. And I can honestly say I am now. And I think that's what we all need to do. Live our lives, not in fear. See, we've got this thing where we want to romanticize, and it comes from movies, it comes from our perceptions of what courage is, and we want to romanticize, honestly, death, we want to romanticize dying in battle. Like when I became a cop, I romanticized, I want to serve something greater than myself. And I was. But it wasn't good. Because ultimately it was serving the arbitrary dictates of very immoral, greedy people that we let rule us. I seen a meme on Facebook that I thought was funny. It said, hey, I simp, but when I simp for beautiful women. You dudes who vote right are simping for old white guys. I just thought that was hilarious. Now keep in mind, I don't vote right or left. I don't look at it as two factions and idealisms of the same, of a country. It's not two governments. It's one government working in tandem with one another beautifully. I've said that before. I'll say it again. And that's the last I'm going to talk about. As far as politics go, there is no political solution. I'll just say that. But we romanticize death. When I went in the Marine Corps, a small country, Kuwait, was invaded by a big country, Iraq. I was planning on going in the Marines prior to that, before that war ever broke out. I was in a delayed enlistment program. I wanted to go in the Marines point blank because I didn't like college. I knew I wanted to be a cop, and I wanted to become an MP. Well, they gave me the next best thing, which was security forces. I wanted to have that challenge of the Marines. Young men sometimes want to challenge themselves physically. I wanted to have that challenge. I was already disciplined. I was already a first-degree black belt. I got my black belt right before I went in the Marines, which means I was knocking on that door for a couple of years. I had discipline. So the Marine Corps wasn't going to provide that, although it did. Certainly gave me some bad habits too, but it did provide some things that did change my life. Once I broke out of the mind control. While in the Marines, I was awarded an unofficial, we'll call it medal. I've taken pictures of it and posted it on Facebook. I was awarded the GAF helmet. The GAF helmet was awarded to those non-rated, non-commissioned Marines who were able to gaff off command and basically not follow orders very well, but still be squared away and not get in trouble. And I guess it was passed on from generation to generation, and when it was passed on to me by a Marine, I'll just say his name, Corporal Evans, when he passed it on to me, he knew I was going to be leaving soon. He was going to be leaving soon. He said, there's no one else here who you could pass this on to when you leave. Take it with you. And I have kept the GAF helmet my whole life. Do a lot of moves and everything else. I'm quite proud of that GAF helmet. Anyway, I went into the Marines because I seen a bigger country invading a small country, and it was the first time that has happened since, Germany in World War II tried to take over the world. There's other truths I'm finding out about all of that as I research more and more. And you have to research a lot once you realize you've been lied to, because it's the victorious people in history. It is the victorious warlords who write history. You've been lied to. So we want to, it seems, romanticize dying for your country, romanticize loving somebody. Say a woman, for instance, I love you so much, I would die for you. Okay, that's your undying love, right? I would die for them, I love them so much. Okay, here's where I tell you that's bullshit. And the reason why I say that is we got to quit romanticizing fatalistic themes, fatalistic stuff, death. Coming from somebody who has died twice, I can most assuredly tell anyone listening, it takes absolutely no talent or skill to die. None whatsoever. It takes no talent, no skill. In fact, I had no control of it when I was laying on my deathbed. None. It was something I had to accept as I had time to think. I was about to die a straw death, as they say, the old Viking insult. Your father died a straw death because they went out and sought their death, which is something I don't think we should do either. I want to die a straw death. I want time to reflect. Because the first time I died, I was basically clapped out. I got hit by a car. There was no pain. I died. So I can tell you, there's no skill involved, man. It's really easy. You talk to any soldier or Marine or anybody who's been in war and has had to see the horrors of war, they don't come back and romanticize it. They come back and they're in therapy the rest of their life. And those who gleefully do it, who are really not all there in the head, they'll tell you it's very easy to take a life once you've done it a few times. It's simple. You pull a trigger, a life ends. Taking life is almost as easy as losing it. So instead of dying for somebody, it's much harder to live for them. So don't die for what you love. Live for what you love. That's just something that I wanted to say. Because as long as we keep these goofy, ridiculous ideations in our heads running as a background program, we're going to continue feeding into this dialectic, this loop that we're in throughout history. Let me go into some quick stuff real quick. Funnel 5, freedom under natural law, which is what we all need to live in adherence to. Freedom Under Natural Law 5 is on February 21st and 22nd. It's coming up. It's less than a month away. I'm happy to say my presentation is done. My presentation is titled The Hammer and the Flame. And I hope it's well received. I talk about how and why I left the order following business, how I got over some unhealthy coping mechanisms. At least I started to hint at that. Read my book, Rise from Darkness. It can be found for free, but it's also on Amazon. I don't really plug my books very often, but Violence and Ego, Understanding the Fundamentals of Functional Self-Defense. Those two books actually go together real well right now in this climate that we live in, because people don't understand self-defense either. Check those out. And let me see here. I wanted to look at something else. Something that I wanted to also slowly touch on is all the street theater that they're doing, which is aimed at creating division, at creating violence. They want to create violence, and they want an excuse to enact more authoritarian stuff. Instead of blaming what the left did actually on purpose to complement what the right is doing now. Okay, understand they both want to take your ability away to defend yourself. All right? I want you all to remember the things that you dislike and the things that you do like about your political gods and the political gods of the people that you've been turned against, the human beings that you have been turned against, mostly because of your own ego. I want to remind you guys something about the Constitution of the United States of America. If I came over to your house, asked you to come out on the porch, and we sit down at a table, and I take a pen and paper, and I, Dan, your neighbor, a human being, says, scribble, 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 scribble. Here's your rights, because I said they're your rights. Here you go. What would you say to me? I'm sure a lot of people would kick me the hell off their porch. This guy's insane. That's what we allowed with the Constitution. So let me explain to you what the Constitution is really about. The Constitution it's not really about our rights. It's not about what we are allowed to do. That's not what the Constitution is about. It's not about the people's rights of what they're allowed to do. The Constitution is about what the government is not allowed to do. Don't let them trick you, fool you. The Constitution is it was written down by a group of men who wanted to institute a government, and they throw some fancy language in there, but they got one thing right. What they put in the Constitution was basically what government is not allowed to do, not what it grants its citizens to do, because we're not fucking slaves. And if you act like a slave, you'll be a slave. Does anyone own a dog and a cat? Okay. I had a German Shepherd. We had 4 cats with that German Shepherd. 2 of the cats ran from that German Shepherd constantly. The German Shepherd would chase them. They then started doing erratic cat things that you don't like when you have to clean up poop in strange places, right? They acted like prey, and the German Shepherd responded as a predator. The other 2 cats, the black cats, I called them the little spookies. They looked at the German Shepherd like he was retarded. They wouldn't run from him. Actually, they called him up a couple times pretty good. And he leaves them alone. They lay down together. They chill. So there is an allegory even in that. Quit thinking that your rights can be bestowed upon you magically by other human beings via a piece of paper. That paper was written to tell you what the government is not allowed to do. I never call for violence. I think violence begets more violence. I believe they're trying to get us into a stirred up mindset to really, really heat things up, to create violence. And there's a reason why I go by the moniker of spiritual anarchist. I don't want violence. Just because I've trained my whole life and I'm good at using force to defend myself doesn't mean I want to fight. It doesn't mean I want violence. Jordan Peterson, who I don't agree with on his stance with the stuff going on in the Middle East, I think he's mind-controlled and all that. I would never even debate him on that, but his credentials and what he has stood for and a lot of the other things he says, I completely 100% agree with a lot of his stuff. And when he says, a harmless man is not a good man, a good man is a very, very dangerous man who voluntarily keeps that under control, keeps it in check. They want you to be harmless. You should be very dangerous and very peaceful. Don't do what it is they want you to do. I think I'll leave that alone. The rest of the street theater and the rest of the clown show is just, it's ridiculous to me. It really is. It's nuts. So there's some things I want to talk about today that go into something else, and I've got my notes and they're all over the place. Hold on a second. Let me see something here. Anyone ever watch Winter is Coming, the Game of Thrones? So episode, what season was it in? In season 5, episode 9 of the Game of Thrones, Dances with Dragons. There's a sacrifice that happens that upset me greatly just watching it. The father, who was Stannis Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, claim it, to the Iron Throne. He was manipulated by a woman, a witch, Melisandre. He was convinced that sacrificing his young daughter, about 12 years old, would bring victory to his house. Ultimately, and he'd get the Iron Throne, but ultimately, he was abandoned by his army. What a moral army that was. He sacrificed his daughter. The scene hit me hard. Because as a father, you're supposed to protect your children. He betrayed his daughter. She was imprisoned. tortured, dragged out, tied to a wooden pyre. She screamed for him as they burned her alive. That greatly affected me. It was just a TV show, The Game of Thrones. See, they say that art imitates life. And as I was thinking about it, I don't think art imitates life. I think art reveals life. There's a saint in the Catholic Church. Believe me, I'm not Catholic. But this saint came into my peripherals. Saint Agnes. She was said to be 12 or 13 years old at the time of her execution. And this was between, let me see if I can go, let me find it. Bear with me here. Yeah, St. Agnes is one of the most thoroughly documented early Christian martyrs, with her death dated to the Diocletian persecutions of the 4th century. Diocletian had persecutions going on in the 4th century, specifically persecuting Christians. And it was Constantine that came up several years after her demise, who ended up then allowing Christianity to be considered legal, right? To worship. Again, what we have is two different religions causing death and destruction. So Agnes was a Roman girl of noble birth she was born in 291 CE, renowned for her beauty and her unyielding vow of chastity. Go figure, a 12 or 13-year-old girl that doesn't want to have sex. Remember, things back then were a little bit different, and children were treated like adults at a very young age. And I think the Satanists back then loved it. The ones now have to fight to have that happen. She was celebrated as one of the most earliest Christian martyrs. She was so beautiful that many of the guard for the emperor, were trying to woo her, and they had noble backgrounds, and they were reporting all this to the emperor, to that governor of that area, and they wanted her to renounce her faith. And she refused. The word sacrificial lamb is also often bestowed to her, or comes from her. Her father, of noble birth, begged her to, renounce your faith. And I could only imagine that it really wasn't begging. We can't know the full history of it. He was involved in the politics. He was of noble birth. He was of such nobility that he was able to own his own land back then, and she had a ballista, okay, a basilia, which is a church-like in tune, and even Constantine's daughter is laid in it. This girl right now is invoked as the patron saint of girls, of virgins, of victims of sexual violence, of betrothed couples, of gardeners, of all things. They took her to a brothel before she was to be executed. It says that her hair grew, they stripped her naked and took her to a brothel. And it says that her hair grew so long that she wasn't actually naked. Every guard that tried to rape her, there were several, they were struck blind. One died. She said a prayer over his body, and he came back to life. Doesn't matter if this was real, if everything in this historical accounting is real or not. She was martyred. They brought her back and put her on the wood pyre. They lit the flames, but the flames would not engulf her. They were having a real problem, creating her demise. Finally, she had her throat sliced like a sacrificial lamb. In some Western traditions, she was beheaded, but in the old Eastern traditions, it says she was stabbed in the throat by one of the order followers who was ordered to do it. This was in that liminal space between religions, between religious beliefs, from the polytheistic old Roman gods to the monotheistic belief in Christianity. Okay? There was that liminal space Jesus was in when they attempted to murder him, because I believe in the Jewish book of the Essenes, and I believe, personally, and these are the things that I've read, the Gnostic texts, Jesus didn't really die on the cross. But he was still, blood was let. He was tortured. They thought they had murdered him. So my question is how come between every age, and how come between every switch of religious beliefs, we're obviously moving away from the Abrahamic religions now? The Pope still wears the fish. That's from the age of Pisces. Well, we're in the age of Aquarius, the age of knowing. We're on the cusp of being in that liminal space between religious beliefs that they want to create. They want us to, worship something else. How come all this blood's being let again? So let me continue. These are the questions we have to ask ourselves. Let me see here. So Constantine, he rose to power in 272 after Agni's death, and then he legalized Christianity in 313 CE. And my question is if we can start to see the pattern in this repeated loop, can we break the pattern? Why do they always want to have some type of bloodletting? Because blood equals life. Blood marks irreversible change. Empires force transitions through violence. Humans will ritualize our fear, hence our romanticizing death for something greater than ourselves, including love. Sometimes to live is to have faith. Sometimes living takes more courage. Like I said, dying is super easy. It takes absolutely no talent or skill. But sometimes life takes talent. It takes tenacity. It takes forging ahead. Life can be hard. So don't talk about what you would die for. Instead, talk about what you would live for. We have too much death being put out into the collective now, because it's very easy to murder and it's very easy to die. It's a lot harder to live. Why don't we romanticize living? We're romanticizing the wrong things. And, again, I can't say this enough, Art does not imitate life. Art reveals life. Because St. Agnes and the girl from the Game of Thrones are almost exact parallel stories to one another. And I don't hold St. Agnes' father harmless. Fuck him. He should have stopped it. With his political ties, he should have stopped it, or he should have saved her or been by her side. At the same time that I don't want to romanticize death, I want to romanticize life. I'm not going to say, I fight for what's behind me, not what's in front of me. You fight where your masters tell you to fight, and it's usually for oil. Or the chaos they want when regimes and ages and religions are changing. And we're in that liminal space again. Now, even during our time frame when cultures have not been so fatalistic, there's always some type of blood sacrifice. Even the ones that don't involve death. We got Hebrew circumcision. We've got Greek and Roman bloodletting, Mayan bloodletting. It was painful but non-lethal, although they were ripping out hearts too. Scandinavians, Vikings used animal blood. Christians do the Eucharist right now, which is symbolic of eating the flesh and blood of Christ. Okay, these initiation rites using drops of blood. I get it. Blood is life. Why don't we like life, cling to life, live life? I would choose death over slavery. But I'm not a slave. I never will be one. I'm not going to have anybody acting like I'm their slave. Now, kinky stuff aside, I got some girls that I really dig and, whatever, but I digress. I'm joking. What I'm really saying is I'm not going to act like a slave. Therefore, the German Shepherd isn't going to chase me. In my story, the German Shepherd and the cat. Violence always appears when symbolic blood stops being enough for the power. Agnes died in the hinge between Diocletian's collapsing authority and Constantine's rise. It was a transitional era marked by fear, propaganda, and the weaponization of the laws. Doesn't that mirror the feeling of a world in a pressure cooker, a pressure chamber that we have going on today? Doreen Baratheon, his daughter, Stannis Baratheon, she was sweet, gentle. She was a book-loving child who loved to read and learn, and she was burned alive at the stake. St. Agnes was pretty much the same thing. So as a father, somebody who is a protector, as somebody who has protected others at any given time that I could, all this is disgusting to me. The art revealing life is disgusting, and the life that we have lived in history is disgusting, and we're in a constant loop. Constant loop. I might do a podcast on this so I can have some visuals. But sometimes radio doesn't really nail it home like how a podcast can, where you have slides and visuals you can show people. I'm single. I don't have anybody. It's not because I haven't been told I'm a decent looking guy. I've been told that for an old dude. But I'm not going to settle. I'm not settling until I have my queen, who is a triangle to me. And when I say triangle, it's mind, body, spirit. Picture the point of the triangle. Agape. Cosmic love. And sometimes faith. See, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, and the law is love under will, because it takes will to do all the right things, but the law is love under courage, and you have to have the will to have courage. Sometimes it takes courage to have faith. So love is the law under faith. Agape, cosmic love, in service to something greater than ourselves. That's the point, pointing upwards to the cosmos of the triangle. The bottom left point of the triangle is your grounded emotions by alignment, love, and courage. Our thoughts create our emotions. Then the right side of the point of the triangle is actions based in love. Now I want you to think to yourselves, as order followers out there, committing acts of aggression because somebody in a suit who doesn't have the courage to do shit themselves is ordering you to for money. Are the actions you're taking, are they based in love? The guy who joins the Marines, if we go back to my time in the Marine Corps, when the war started, I still looked at it as, wow, this small country is being invaded by a big bully country. I most certainly am going to go in to fight that. Years later, now that I'm not young, dumb, and full of you-know-what, I now know what that war was about. It was about the resources of oil and keeping unrest over there in that area of the world. I also know that every time there's an archaeological find that will give us some insight to our history, they start a war over there, so we can't have researchers there because they don't want us to know the fucking truth of our existence. When you're tricked into fighting for something greater than yourself and you're committing atrocities to other human beings, are you courageous? Or is that person who may have joined the military at first because they wanted to be a cook, a chef, to get some skills, to get out and have a job because they didn't have the money to go to college, that person who sits on the runway and refuses to go because they're not going to murder in the name of some old rich white guy's greed, who's more courageous? I weep when I think of the courage people don't have when it comes to hurting others, which is easy to do. Try uplifting others instead. Try empowering others. Don't take away their confidence. Give them confidence. Help them. And don't do it expecting anything in return. Do it because the more we do it, the more everyone else will do it. We are at the precipice and a point in history where we can break the fucking loop. In 2022, researcher, beloved person, Jordan Maxwell, I remember him being one of his last interviews, I remember him being very forlorn. He was a researcher. Okay, just if anyone doesn't know who Maxwell is, I would believe that anybody who's listening to the show probably knows who Jordan Maxwell was. He was an occult researcher, a religious researcher, very studied human being, one of the smartest men in the world on theology, on history, on religious history, on the occult. He was very forlorn before he passed. And his view was that we're in a never-ending loop, that empires rise, they centralize power, corruption spreads, people become distracted and misled, and then there's the collapse that follows. And then a new empire rises and repeats the same pattern. To him, Rome, Egypt, Babylon, and the modern world They were different masks on the same face. Really the same face of slavery. And there's been a lot of historians and mythologists and philosophers who have had similar things and said similar things for centuries. See, we're not the first species on this planet. We're not the first civilization, I should say, that's gotten to this level of advanced technology. In fact, there was the Atlanteans, possibly the Lemurians, who actually had much higher technology because at one point they had a higher level of consciousness. And it can be seen in some of the things you read about them when they still lived close to nature, which is why they had this higher level of consciousness about them, despite their advanced consciousness, telepathy. Some people saying can go in and out of, this actual dimension. If you really want to get into some of the stuff, look at Michael Tsarina's work. I highly recommend it. But they had a more of an affinity for nature. I want you to think of Marvel's cinematic universe when they show you Asgard. All this magical stuff. Well, that's actually higher technology. But they were still close to nature. Maxwell, he spent decades studying religion, political, banking, astrological, different mythic archetypes. And he just kept seeing the same pattern. And before he passed, he knew we were on our way back to that. But see, the age of Aquarius is the age of knowing, so they can't continue their lies. He believed, and a big part of his despair, is he felt that people too quickly would forget their history. We do forget our history. And that people don't learn from past mistakes. That's the whole point of the teachings of natural law. You have to have your hand stuck in a fire and held there to know that it'll burn you. Or can you take the proper precautions to not have that happen? In a lot of Mark Passio's analogies, that's one of his. It makes sense. Do we have to have the same shit happen to us over and over? On a global level, look at history and look at how we set it up. Does any human being under God's creation have a right to rule over, lord over, or coerce another human being? The answer is no. Is a constitution scribbled on a piece of paper telling you your rights, or was it some people who had a little bit of wisdom who wrote down what government is not allowed to do? Does anyone think that the puppeticians are the ones calling the real shots? They throw shit out there on purpose. A lot of mis and disinformation. I actually will believe nothing. I won't outright reject anything, but I don't just blindly believe either, because there's so much. There's so much trickery. Think of the hobbits. The hobbitses. They're tricksy. When I heard a certain small Napoleon-like chief talk this week about you would have to pay if you speak against them. They're doing this shit on purpose. Do you get it? They put out the symbolisms on purpose to mislead, to scare, to keep you in a state of fear. And even if it's not consciously, if you're not consciously aware of, they know it's going to hit your subconscious. It will. So the loop continues, because the collective memory will reset every generation. And it seems like over and over throughout history, we have these extinction level events. Jordan Maxwell, he saw spiritual stagnation, not spiritual growth. And he wasn't anti-spiritual. He just believed that religions repeat the same myths. Doesn't matter what civilization they come from. There's literally over 40 iterations of the Jesus story. he talked about the astrological background of the whole Jesus story. There's a point in December where the sun stands still for 3 days. Then it rises, then it continues moving again. Institutions repeat the same mechanisms. People repeat the same fears, patterns. Societies repeat the same moral failures. And the biggest moral failure we're repeating is our failure to understand what our rights are. Okay, our rights are not something written down on a piece of paper. Our rights are our rights intrinsically at our birth, and that right is freedom and the pursuit of happiness. It's not a guarantee, but it's our right. People don't know their rights. They don't know what real morals are. People can have different morals or beliefs or ethical behaviors, but what is moral and what is not moral has already been written into creation, and it's real simple, and I believe it is the foundation of what we need in the world to actually try to get to a higher level of consciousness without having chips put on our brain and forced into this higher level of consciousness where we're really just slaves. Your rights are not an adjective. Your rights aren't something that describes what you're allowed and not allowed to do based on what some arbitrarily dictated shit written down on a piece of paper by some old dude that you're simping for and voting for every fucking 4 years. Our rights are actions. Our rights are verbs. Okay, our rights are actions. Any action that we initiate that does not initiate harm, any action that we partake in that does not initiate harm to another human being, and I will go as far as does not observe the harming of another human being without doing something physically about it or bringing it to the attention of others or saying something about it. Because I think if you let it happen, you're giving them implied consent to do it to you. So our rights are any actions we take that don't initiate harm. So what aren't rights? Your rights are the things we're not allowed to do. What is immoral are the actions we take that does initiate harm to other human beings, other sentient beings. Even the animal kingdom. We have to know what our rights are, and we have to know what our rights are not. Okay? So the Constitution doesn't tell us what our rights are. It tells us what the government's rights are not. And I am completely agnostic when it comes to the political puppets on both sides of the aisle and all over the fucking world. And throughout history where certain individuals would get power over others. We have to stop. It has to stop. In small communities, people work together. There are leaders, okay? There will be leaders, always. There needs to be. But let's understand what a true leader is. A true leader is a teacher who is actually an authority in a given area that knows more about certain things than others. And people will go to that person naturally. That's a leader. A leader is a teacher. Leaders want to create more leaders. More teachers. Leaders don't want to be in charge of shit. Leaders don't want to rule nothing. They do it naturally. In that respect, every human being has the potential to be a leader in some area. And he sounded very forlorn before he passed because he didn't see the next generation breaking the pattern. He saw distraction and division. They create division, and I wrote about this in Rise from Darkness. The political, gender, there's a war on gender right now. I don't believe the word toxic and a gender trait need to be hyphenated. But now we do have to hyphenate sacred masculine and sacred feminine. The power that both bring to the table, that yin and that yang. Because they've decided to play games with the words and cause and hyphenate toxic with those. gender qualities, mostly toxic masculine. I tried to talk to some retarded left person. Yes, you're a fucking retard. And I asked him, what the hell is a toxic masculine? And he was like, it's exaggerated masculine qualities. And I just said, shut up. There's not one masculine quality that is toxic. Okay? There are people who can do toxic things, which is initiating harm to other sentient beings. That's toxic. Okay? Women who aren't in their power, men are the caretakers and the protectors of women and should give space for their emotions. And women, you are the caretakers for a man's confidence. This is why Rocky needed Adrian. Look at Rocky 2 at the end. She didn't want him fighting in the beginning. Then when she came back too, again, art does not imitate life, it reveals life. She looked at Rocky and she said, there's only one thing I want you to do. Win. What an awesome, awesome thing to have. They don't want that union of the sacred masculine and feminine. They don't want it. I say we starve them of what they do want. We starve them of violence, and we remember our divinity and who we really are. And we start becoming of service to others. And you help your neighbor voluntarily. And we get order followers to see that although you thought you were taking an oath to serve something greater than yourself, you were. But the ones who are good, the part of that oath that sticks out in your head is to protect and serve. Not serve the arbitrary dictates of some immoral politician or corrupt person, but serve people in a safety way. I had to take an oath when I worked in the prison. Same oath that cops take and military takes. That included protecting inmates from worse inmates. So I had to protect people who smoked a green leaf from other people who ate people. And our system isn't monetized. Anyway, I can get up on the soapbox and I can keep going and going and going about it with the contradictions I see. We can cure and reconcile those contradictions only if we have love under courage, love under will, and love under faith. And remember, let's romanticize life. Let's romanticize life. Because romanticizing death takes absolutely no talent or skill. None. And with that said, man, I know I've been ending early the last couple of weeks. I still technically have a couple more minutes before the music would come on. Now there's times I do talk into the music. There's other times I stop a few minutes early. I am going to start having guests on. I will use the last couple minutes to just talk about this. I have a friend of mine who called me. Hold on a second. Told me about a video he's seen where not only is the snow not able to be melted with fire in the same way it used to be, that a woman took it and put it underneath and she's a chemist, put it underneath a microscope and saw plastic material and different things in it that shouldn't be in water. Because that's all snow is frozen liquid, frozen water. So, chemtrails, anybody? Or how about those Canadian fires back in 2023? You know, wildfires burning wood, trees that smelled like electrical rubber burning. They really think we're dumb, but you know what? We're always in our phones. And we only could watch a 2-minute video or less. And we have to look to somebody else in a position of authority to deal with our problems, and we have to act like the bigger victim. Otherwise, we're going to be seen as wrong. The one who's the victim is right. Well, right now, all of humanity is right. I'm going to leave everybody with this, man. Nothing but love. Until next time, I want you to remember this. Humanity. Assemble.
Stand one way.